Last week, we talked about Bernie Sanders' reluctance to unequivocally say that he would support abolishing ICE, and I said that we really needed to put pressure on him if we do in fact want him to adopt this position, because Bernie Sanders, unlike most politicians, he actually does listen to Americans. And, over the last week, he's done some soul searching, and it turns out he is in fact coming over to our side because he is signaling support, perhaps to maybe abolish ICE. So he stated on Twitter, "In 2002, I voted against the creation of DHS and the establishment of ICE. That was the right vote. Now it is time to do what Americans overwhelmingly want: abolish the cruel, dysfunctional immigration system we have today and pass comprehensive immigration reform. That will mean restructuring the agencies that enforce our immigration laws, including ICE. We must not be about tearing small children away from their families. We must not be about deporting dreamers, young people who have lived in this country virtually their entire lives. We must not be about forcing over 10 million undocumented people, many of whom have been here for decades, to continue living in fear and anxiety. Congress must do what the American people want. Let us create a humane and rational immigration system." So understand that it doesn't seem like he's 100% there yet. Like, he's not willing to say, "I want to abolish ICE" just yet. But saying that he wants to restructure ICE is a step in the right direction. It's a drastic step in the right direction. We're starting to really move the needle here because Kirsten Gillibrand became the first senator that states that she wants to abolish ICE, and now other semi-progressive Democrats like Bill de Blasio are also getting on board. And last week we talked about how Kamala Harris was signaling, a change of heart as well. So look, it takes time to change hearts and minds, and we've been talking about abolish ICE vocally for what, a month at the most? The media has been talking about this idea now for like a week since Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez won. So it takes time, and we're already making a tremendous amount of progress. Now look, I hear from the progressives who say this is, we might be going too far here. We don't want to say abolish ICE. We don't want to push them, to this point where they're not electorally viable and Trump ends up winning again in 2020. But you have to understand, even if I see why individuals think that way, because of course, when you look at public opinion polls, it indicates that people aren't really in favor of abolishing ICE yet. In fact, they're against it. However, there's still a large percentage of voters that aren't sure, which gives us a unique opportunity to educate people, educate them and let them know that ICE is completely unnecessary. And currently, Republicans are trying to convince people that those of us in favor of abolishing ICE, well, we're crazy. We want open borders, and, we're just these extremists, but that's just a laughable statement. ICE was created in 2003. That's it. It was voted on in 2002, created in 2003, and it wasn't like when ICE was created, we then established borders. We've always had borders, and I can assure you all that we'll still have borders even after ICE ceases to exist. So, of course, as usual, Republicans don't have an argument as to why we shouldn't have an American Gestapo in this country that just tracks down and harasses immigrants. So what do? They fearmonger about our position, create this straw man, and say that we're in favor of open borders. Nobody's saying that. We're saying we need to abolish ICE, and this is a position that is reasonable and based off of their numerous human rights abuses and their mistreatment of immigrants. And look, when it comes to border security, we already have other government agencies that do secure the border. We have the United States Border Patrol. What ICE does is seeks out undocumented immigrants and rounds them up. They're essentially American Gestapo. They're unnecessarily cruel, and their existence is redundant, seeing that there's already multiple other agencies that do what you say is essential to, maintain our current immigration system. And look, we have ICE offices across the country. We have an ICE office in Portland, Oregon. Oregon doesn't border any other country like Texas does. So why are they in Oregon? They're not protecting the border. They're just here to track down and harass immigrants. But understand that Republicans like Donald Trump will contend that, we want to get rid of borders. That's why we're advocating for the abolition of ICE. But again, if ICE was about borders, then they wouldn't be placed in any states that weren't, bordering Mexico. That just wouldn't be the case. So it makes no sense how somebody can make this jump that, someone wanting to abolish ICE must also mean that they want open borders. That's just not correct. Getting rid of ICE, it doesn't mean that we're going to be crippled and we'll be incapable of dealing with immigrants and immigration, when, again, ICE is just a cruel arm of, a collective of agencies that deal with immigration, and we don't need it. And if you're a Republican and you are a small government Republican specifically, wouldn't you want to get on board with less government? I mean, this is an agency that if you eliminate it, then you are literally shrinking the size of government. How can you not be on board and still claim to be a small government Republican? So, I mean, look, at the end of the day, we've got to change hearts and minds. Public opinion might not be on our side on this issue yet, but that doesn't mean that we don't fight for it. We have to fight for it because that's what's right. There was a point in time where Medicare for All didn't have a majority of support, and we still fought for it because that's the right thing to do, because it would improve lives. So you've got to start somewhere, and this is just the beginning of a national conversation about the utility of ICE, and hopefully most Americans will get educated and realize that this is a new agency that's unnecessarily cruel and unnecessary, generally speaking. If you want, an agency, a law enforcement agency to protect the border, we've already got that. We don't need ICE. We just don't. And abolishing ICE would get rid of a lot of this cruelty we see and human rights abuses that we see, committed against immigrants. So I think this is the right thing to do, and I'm going to continue to push the envelope on this issue.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.